Very happy now to be joined once again by Massachusetts Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr. I keep wanting to put majority leader in there, but it ain't happening. But Senator Tarr, welcome back to MSO. How are you?
Well, thanks, Rick, and I really like the way you think, so I don't mind you making that mistake, but I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm well. But by the way, that's not a commentary on where I stand politically. It's a commentary on where I stand with you and supporting you. So thank you for all that you do for us here on Cape Ann. Senator, I want to start with the lead topic on tartalk.com from yesterday, and that has to do with the state of the coast report. Paul Layton did a big story on that in today's Salem News, and let's proceed from there, if you would, please.
Sure. So, Rick, one of the most interesting things that's happened in the issue of erosion and coastal change and climate change recently is this report that's been done by the trustees of reservations, and it was released yesterday. And the report is called "The State of the Coast." And what's interesting is that the trustees actually own a lot of coastline in Massachusetts, and they feel a particular responsibility for the stewardship of that coastline. And as part of that stewardship, they wanted to analyze exactly what we're experiencing and try to identify some key issues. And one of the important things about the report is that it does not try to dictate what to do, but it highlights issues that need to be addressed and cites some examples of how those issues are. So the report is meant to provide a lot of information and to contribute to a conversation that on the North Shore has actually been going on now for right around a decade, because that's when the Merrimack River Beach Alliance, which was formed by the communities of Salisbury, Newburyport, and Newbury, joining together. And I'm very honored to chair that alliance. They began to say, we can't do this alone. We need to join together as coastal communities. And I'm very pleased to say that since that original group formed, and it was about a decade ago, it has now created another group called the Northeast Coastal Coalition, which is every community from Cape Ann to the New Hampshire border working together. And we've seen some examples of that, Rick, on Cape Ann. We've seen, as a result of that teamwork and that advocacy, dredging happen in Manchester Harbor. We just saw the Annisquam River get dredged. The Merrimack River has been dredged, and the Merrimack River is scheduled to be dredged again. But what's changing is that we don't just dredge rivers and remove sediment from clogged waterways. We try to use that sediment in ways that help to build our coastal resilience. And so in the first instance, that's been doing things like putting the sand on dunes and rebuilding dune structures. But now we're thinking about the next generation of those projects, and one of them that's being researched in our area is the idea of taking sediment from dredging and depositing it in thin layers on the marsh to allow the marsh to grow and get ahead of sea level rise so that it can continue to be a great coastal defense. So there are a lot of things that are happening that are very exciting in our part of the state. And I'm very proud of the leadership that our part of the state has shown. And this report was an attempt by the trustees to say, this is a really important subject. We need to operate based on facts and science and modeling. And we need to continue the conversation, and we need to accelerate the conversation because we're seeing the effects of erosion at a very rapid rate.
Is this report somewhere in writing, Senator, that we can take a look at it, or is this something that will be evolving?
Yeah, no, the report, Rick, was actually released for public consumption yesterday, so it's on the website of the trustees of reservations, and I'll actually be posting links to it so you can find those on tartalk.com and on my Facebook page so you can read it. The report is not lengthy, but it is very, very informative, and it does have individual pages for a number of the communities in our region, and it's very helpful to look at that and see the kind of issues that we're facing.
Okay. All right, let's turn our attention to something that's been ongoing for so long, and then it has to do with our reaction and our working around or with this pandemic situation. And of course, some schools have already reopened. Other schools are in flux. There are many different plans out there and many different ideas. What's your take on this, Senator, and what's it look like from Boston?
Well, you know, it's a very complicated and a very sensitive topic, Rick. And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Baker-Polito administration have really left the decision to individual school districts to be able to be made by school committees as well as local officials. And one of the requirements was that the plans had to be submitted by last Friday. And so we're starting to get a look at those plans. And essentially they indicate that about 70% of the schools in Massachusetts, the school districts, are going to use some form of in-person learning. What we see a lot of are so-called hybrid plans, where there's some in-person learning and some remote learning. There's a lot of different approaches to this. And the one thing that I can say about it that's absolutely the case is that it's a very fluid situation. Folks are continuing to look at transmission rates, both statewide and in individual communities, and trying to understand the very best things that they can do to be able to make sure that schools don't become a place where the COVID-19 pandemic is spread. And it's very interesting, Rick, because there was a report issued earlier this week indicating that students and younger people may be much more involved in transmitting the disease and carrying the disease than might have been previously thought. So this is a situation that's continuing to unfold. And more recently, as you may know, the administration, again, through the Department of Public Health and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has issued a requirement that every student over the age of 6 months that's involved in any educational setting needs to have a seasonal flu vaccine. And that has been somewhat of a controversial decision. There have been folks that have objected to that fairly strenuously. There have been others that have supported it. But it indicates the nature of the times that we're in, where difficult decisions are made, and folks can have very strong opinions about them. And the requirement of a flu shot is one of them. And in our office, we're continuing to hear both sides be able to call us and talk to us about how they feel. So that, again, is a fluid situation.
Senator, final question for me, and we didn't talk about this in a pregame warm-up, so deflect it if you must. But Senator Lovely is put something out on Twitter about reopening or having a discussion with tavern owners and entertainment places, and also that was in the Salem News. How are things going in general right now, Senator, with the reopening? Because I know the governor pulled back slightly this past week or so in terms of the gathering of 50 people or more and so on. But I haven't seen anything really negative since then. So how are things from your perspective?
So in general, we are continuing to move in a positive trend, both in terms of the number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 and the number of deaths in Massachusetts. But what had happened over the last several weeks is there were a couple of days where we saw increases in cases that didn't fit the trend. And because Massachusetts has been a leader in contact tracing among virtually all the states, some of those cases were traced to particular incidents of house parties. There were some athletic training activities that took place without following the proper guidance. And so we're seeing a little bit of a fine-tuning of the Massachusetts approach, so that now you have a map that was released by the administration will be updated of the transmission rates and the cases in every community. And you have much more of a focus on looking at individual hotspots, if you will. And so there was a team developed that can be deployed at the request of a community by the administration to go and help in individual communities, individual municipalities, to deal with spikes or increases in cases. Now, what you're referring to is the reopening plan, Rick, and we are in stage 1 of phase 3. And what the administration has indicated is that phase 2, or stage 2 rather, is going to be pushed off longer than it was planned to be pushed off, so that there will be some additional time, hopefully, to continue to see downward trends in both cases and deaths. And then phase 4, which affects places of large gatherings, like the ones that Senator Lovely might have been referring to, that is something that in the current plan won't go into effect until either there's a vaccine or until therapeutic drugs have been developed to effectively combat COVID-19. And while there's been some promising news lately, that's certainly something that's going to be on a more distant horizon. And yet, the closure of businesses generally in Massachusetts is something for which we're paying a very high price. We continue to have very high unemployment rates in our state, and that's why there's constantly a discussion about what is the right balance between needing to protect public health and needing to reopen businesses so that we reduce economic harm. Those are difficult decisions, but they're ones that are being thought about every single day.
Well, Senator, I don't envy you your job, but I thank you for doing it as well as you do, and also for taking the time this afternoon once again. Really appreciate it.
Rick, it's an